these aren't the only 5 by any means, right? Happy 5 Fact Friday. 5 Fact Friday. I'm Charlie Lambden, and it is 5 Fact Friday. Good morning, everybody. I'm coming to you live from central London. I'm just off Oxford Street. I'm staying in a little hotel that I can heartily recommend you shouldn't stay in. It's 5 Fact Friday. It's Friday, the 24th of October, 2025. And I think given the headlines this week, it is a prescient thing that I'm in London. I always love coming to London. And for those of you who received my newsletter at 8 o'clock this morning, I'm sorry. My thought of the week was I went to bed thoroughly depressed with what I'd written. But we have, as ever, the 5 facts. It's actually 7. I've got lots for you this week. I must confess to being teensy bit hungover after I spent a night out last night celebrating Thomas Legal's 1-year anniversary in London. They've been in their Gloucester headquarters for a long time. So Thomas Legal are the conveyancers that I work with, and those guys among you who use my recommended conveyancers in the south of England will be using Thomas Legal. They've been fantastic partners with me for 3 years. They're sponsoring my Best Agent event in London on Thursday, the 6th of November, the No Valuations event. And last night was it was such a cheerful, happy, lovely bunch of people. And it reminded me that that's one of the things as a business owner that's really hard to achieve. And when you do, it's amazing. It comes through in everyone's work. When people enjoy the company they work for and the people they work with, everyone does their job more cheerfully and things get done better. So thank you, Thomas Legal, for having me last night. Just around the corner here, I was able to stumble home to my hotel. Really great night. Met some fantastic people, including a company I might also be working with soon to help you guys some more on the surveying front. So watch this space. Anyway, 5 Fact Friday. Roughly 5, sometimes a bit more. Today it's a bit more. The 5 most significant facts newly reported in the housing market in the last 7 days. In my assessment, my judgment, my opinion, are the ones that are of most significance to people moving home or thinking of moving home. And as ever, I'll do a quick run through. Hang on a second. I'll do a quick run through. Good morning, everybody. Got lots of you this morning. Hello, Gomeen. That's a new name. Welcome. 3 Lixie, Peter Hedditch. Good morning. Yes. Hello. Timo 92933. Boss Hog. Naida. Good morning. Ashley. Frustrated home buyer. Hello there. Cold and slightly drizzly mid-Wales, Shropshire border. That's sunny in London today, where overpricing has hit new levels of crazy. As 5 local agents do whatever it takes to get listings. Don Ferguson, Kevin Helton, Jill Hayes, Jenny Ball, Patati Paul, hi there. Someone called TM DK6KZ says, we have completed. Amazing. Congratulations, everyone that's completing, especially those of you who are trying to get completed before the budget. That is a wise move when things are about the move, not the money. Philip Bergen, good morning. Right, shall I get on with it? Little Carol, hi. Graham Lysett, Stephen Simmons. Okay, I've got to crack on now. Let's get back into it. In no particular order. Government launches emergency measures to tackle the collapse in London new house building. This is a much bigger crisis than I think anyone realizes in terms of it's unprecedented. This didn't happen in 2008, right? It's new building has collapsed to 0, almost 0. Come on to more later. Reeves' council tax hike will hit house prices overnight. Right? This is an article in the Daily Mail that came out, pointing out quite rightly that if she announces that larger properties are going to have larger council tax bills, that's going to have an instant overnight effect on the value of those homes, which is one of the reasons why I've been saying to all the sellers who are waiting for the budget, you guys need your heads examined. If you think that anything in the budget is going to make things better for you as a seller, I'm afraid you're not going to be Very happy. I don't think, could be wrong. Hope I'm wrong. Fact number 3. Shocker, as the Financial Times calls home sellers delusional on price. I mean, the Financial Times is one of the biggest price pumpers of the property price Ponzi of all because of its home building and lending, advertising, banking, all that kind of stuff, And they're coming out and using Lomra's data to call out overpricing. Really, a really insightful couple of quotes. God, I really am hungover this morning, which I'm looking forward to reading to you from that article. The Rightmove October House Price Index came out, and its overall average asking price was actually lower than a year ago. Only a smidge lower than a year ago, but still lower than a year ago. And what's notable about that is that Rightmove is normally the tippy-toppy, most puffy, frothy, foamy, over-the-top index of all. I mean, their actual, what they call their average asking price, the average house price is 100 grand higher than everyone else's average house price. But when all of the other indices are saying that the national average house price growth year on year is somewhere between 0 and 2%, excluding the silly ONS that just makes shit up. It's interesting that Rightmove's actually got a negative figure when it's typically, and that is a leading indicator, right? Because of the time scale over which properties move, whatever's happening to Rightmove's index in relation to the other one, so how it moves, the spread, if you like, between the Rightmove index and the other ones is an interesting leading indicator. And what it tells us is that there's overall, nationally, with lots of regional variations, downward movement in house prices. Okay. 20CI, which is the data outfit that Christopher Watkin uses for his property stats show, put out a quarterly market report saying that there's been a spike of 26% in what they call pensioner property sales. I don't know how they define pensioner exactly, but they're saying that particular demographic suddenly, I mean, that is it's a year-on-year spike. That is a big jump in that demographic selling up. And I don't know whether it includes pensioners selling lettings properties or not. I think it doesn't. I think it's homeowners, owner-occupiers selling. I don't know, though. Either way, what that tells us, and it confirms what I've been saying for a long time, which is that at the top end of the market, there is a abnormally high level of downsizing. Okay. And a national average will conceal that fact. But if there's a much larger volume of people selling at the higher end of prices, that will have the effect on the overall national average of making it look higher than it is, and it will be offsetting price falls at lower prices. Okay, get into it later. And then Bloomberg put out an article which didn't get picked up anywhere else, surprisingly. Maybe because it doesn't sound like it's news, but I thought it was interesting. Using ONS data on a breakdown of London property types to show that the ONS is reporting overall London averages are falling. And it's an interesting graph that breaks it down by property type, and it really shows the pain happening with flats. So there we are. It's very unprofessional of me, isn't it, to be hungover? You can hear it in my voice. It was one of those noisy underground nightclubs where you're having to sort of talk above the music to be heard, and you're with people you haven't met before, and you're trying to be all polite and friendly. And sorry, what did you say? Yeah, oh yes. A lot of nodding in agreement with something that you can't hear. I wonder how many things I agreed with, which I shouldn't have agreed with last night over the noise. Right. Morning, Scarlett. Yes, that is a big spike, Ramble and Root. You're quite right. Dr. Beats, morning. Oh, wow. Thank you, Dr. Beats. I love these. These genuinely make my day. Sold house in January, bought my onward house in April. Couldn't have done it without this channel's help and guidance. Fantastic. Thank you. Made my day. I'm procrastinating getting into the actual weeds of the facts, aren't I? Let's get into it. By the way, for those of you who don't get my newsletter, why not? Why don't you get it? It's free. Hang on a second. Let's just hide that to make some space on the screen. Um, right. Because I'm assuming most of you have heard this news. This was so yesterday afternoon, Steve Reed went on social media. Steve Reed, the housing secretary, saying, "I've just met with Sadiq Khan, and I almost wish I could show it to you. It's just the biggest nothing burger. Their emergency measures to tackle the housing crisis are completely unspecific. They are, oh, we're going to reduce the percentage of properties that have to be affordable from 35% down to 20%. And so that's basically developers saying, we don't want to build houses for poor people because we can't make money doing that. So you've got to reduce the number of. And then someone from the housing association sector and the new building sector said, look, 20% of something is better than 35% of nothing. And at the moment, there's no building happening. Building's pretty much stopped, which is a fairly valid excuse. It's fascinating treatment in London. But they also talk about speeding up the planning process and removing planning blockages. Now, without specified examples of what they mean when they say that, I'm sorry, I call bullshit. I don't believe it. Because the planning process is, I mean, it has to be seen to be believed, the sheer number of hoops that have to be jumped through with paperwork and studies and consultants and all the rest of it. What are they going to do? I mean, maybe they are able to overrule planning decisions. I don't know. Let's see what they actually do, because I think it's more complicated than that. And to be honest, I don't think anything the government does is going to move the needle on this crisis. It might make the marginal difference for a few developments that with 35% affordable home requirement, the numbers don't math up, but with 20%, they just do math up, and therefore they will allow. It might make a slight difference on a few, but in the first 6 months of this year, London's house building target is 88,000. Right, 88,000 is the target for the year to meet Starmer's and Khan's house building target, and they didn't even build 4,000. 88,000, what 12-month target, 6-month total, 3,900 and something, right? So they are on track at that rate to do 9% of their target. So they're going to miss the London house building target by over 90%, right? So fiddling at the edges with some planning stuff and moving the affordable homes margin isn't going to move the needle on this absolute crisis for the house building industry and for London. And I think it's also partly to do with the fact that London itself as a city is going through massive changes. A lot of London's biggest wealth creators, the people that generate income and earn their money here and pay their taxes here, are moving, not just because of government tax measures, but just because there are other more attractive places to go because of basically years and years of failing government policy on the economy, which is why we're all getting poorer per head. And so even if the government does make changes that slightly improve house building, it's not going to make any more. I mean, the problem is the buyers aren't buying. Right? You can build what you like, but if no one's buying, no one's buying. That's it. Right. That's fact number one. There was a slight follow-up on that, which is on the iNews, Vicky Spratt. I actually agree with her on this. Labour's London housing woes have only begun. I agree with that. I've been having a pop at Vicky for not reporting that landlords selling up as the biggest cause of homelessness. She did actually respond and say, "Well, I did talk about it in my book." Well, that's not enough people are reading your book. For people, why aren't you writing about it in the paper? And that story, anger and upset from Labour benches. But again, there's no point in getting upset if you're an MP because people don't want to buy. Because the problem is people not wanting to buy. We'll come on to it. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. Right. So that was fact number one. Fact number two on the Daily Fail: tens of thousands of homeowners could be hit by new council tax bans as rate sites on higher value homes. Okay. Affluent Londoners and those in the southeast are expected to be the prime targets as Chancellor Rachel Reeves tries to find 42 billion to balance Labour's books. Property experts, by the way, I'm not. I exclude myself from that category, right? Property experts believe new council tax bans for higher value properties, rather than a revaluation of all houses across the country, would appeal to the Treasury, boosting tax receipts by raising more cash from well-heeled homeowners. Well-heeled. Are you well-heeled? The point being, if this happens, if Rachel Reeves decides to crank up council tax on higher properties and not on lower value properties, it will have an immediate overnight hit on the value of the higher value properties. It will have a devaluing effect almost like that, right? Depending on how much it is, what the change is. Again, this is one of the reasons why I think sellers who are waiting for the budget and waiting for the market and who still believe that house prices always go up and if they wait, it'll come back. I'm afraid you haven't done the numbers. That's not happening. And those of you who've sold or are going to sell before the budget, last night there were lawyers telling me that there are buyers where they are now actually, they could exchange, they could call up and go, right, ready to exchange today, let's exchange. But the buyers are going, we're going to wait. We're just going to wait for the budget. We're not pulling out, but we're not exchanging. And I think that's really horrible for the sellers involved. Like totally, if I was a seller in that scenario and my agent had more than one buyer lined up, I'd be saying to my agent, are there any other buyers who'd be happy to exchange before waiting for the budget? And if so, I would then say to the buyer, I respect your choice to wait for the budget, but I can't wait that long. I'm going to sell to someone now who wants to. I'm going to sneeze. Why? I've never seen a newsreader on live TV ever have to sneeze. Why does that never happen to them? Right, so that's fact number 2, council tax. Are we only on fact number 2? We gave us 17 minutes. Come on, Johnny, speed it up. Right, next one. This is the Financial Times article that really lays into home sellers. I thought I was dreaming when I first read it. Like, what? These guys are mocking home sellers for being unrealistic about their home's value. Well, guys, you are primary price pumpers. You guys are massively behind, endlessly feeding your readers an always up house price narrative. And now you're turning on them and going, you silly sellers. How can you possibly think that? But look at the numbers in this article, right? I thought were really interesting. So why are UK homeowners so delusional about the value of their property? Why? Because you, along with others, have been telling them that they're worth more. The belief that house prices inexorably appreciate over time is etched deep into the British psyche. That is true. But it's sabotaging sales. Okay. Oh, I know why they're writing this, because they're house building and mortgage lending advertisers are saying, you've got to print something that's going to help sellers come down off the shelf. Otherwise, we're never going to sell any mortgages anymore. Who remembers Bob Monkhouse, The Price is Right? That's definitely leveled at Gen Xers, isn't it? And maybe boomers. But let's just go down. I've highlighted this bit. Listen to this. This year, the number of homes that were overpriced on initial listing, forcing a reduction, grew by 44% in London. So in 1 year, the number of people overvaluing their properties has gone up by 44%. By the way, Foxtons and Dexters, that's down to you boys. Absolute truck thumpets. Reaching their highest level since Lonrose started collecting data in 2000. So this is even worse than 2008. Savills research shows prime prices are down 4% in central London and 3% in regional markets. Nationwide, more homes have sold for less than they were bought for than at any time since circa 2018, according to Hamptons. What? People are selling their homes for less than they paid for them, but that's impossible because house prices always go up. Everybody knows that. I think slowly this uncomfortable truth is seeping in to sellers' minds because of articles like this. Right, that's that. That was that fact number 3, I think. Number 4. So I did a full video on Monday night going through Rightmove's house price index. But just the only point to make on it in today's video is this fact that overall average asking prices are slightly below this time last year, which means the leading indicator is that the whole market overall from the index that normally is the most over optimistic is now saying that the entire market is down. And the other relevant thing I thought, and this actually chimes with the Financial Times point that was just made, right? People at the top end of the value of the market are the ones overpricing the most, right? In the last month, whereas first-time buyer homes and second stepper homes came slightly down in average asking price for new listings, top of the ladder went up 1% in a month. No, we are immune from price falls. Only fools have falling house prices. We at the top have house prices go up and up and up and up. I'm sorry, it's cruel of me to mock like that, but I just want to get the point across, because until people actually wake up and understand that's what's happening, they're going to continue to lose money and lose the opportunity to sell. I'll come into the chat to do some questions, okay, after that in a bit. Put that back on there. Right, we are up to fact number 4, I think. And this is the 20 CI. And they put out this quarterly report on the whole market. Nothing hugely insightful in there, but this point here, pensioner property sales surged by 26%. Our data reveals a significant shift in retirement age home moving behavior, right? That is what I've been calling for, I think, 3 years now, the great downsizing. But all of the national house price indices, it just covers that up. That's happening. And the relevance, okay, what does this mean? You think, okay, Charlie, so what? What does that tell us? It tells you that if you are a seller in that demographic, you've got more competition to sell. So it's going to be even harder than you thought to get the price you want, or you're going to have to drop the price even further than you thought. And I keep saying this, and people keep going, what? But if you've had your house on the market, if you brought your house to the market at the detached house, the larger top end of the market, anywhere in the country, and you're sitting there after 6 months and you haven't sold it, you are 20% and rising too high. The brutal truth about that is that, let's just say you've got 50% equity in that, or you thought at the price you thought it was worth, you had, okay, our house is worth 600,000, we've got 300,000 pound mortgage on it, we've got 300 pounds of equity in it. And I've just gone, no, that's 20% overvalued. That's 40% off your equity or the net worth to you in that house. And a 40% hit to the equity you think you can take out of your property in that particular scenario has a long list of horrible, unwelcome ramifications for people that it's extremely difficult to get their head around. Your retirement plans, plans for your kids or your grandkids, or plans for whatever, care costs. There is this slow dawning realization across that demographic that the retirement funds you thought you had are not as much as you thought they were, number one, and because of inflation, they're no longer worth, right? 300 grand 5 years ago was worth a lot more than 300 grand today. And it is this double whammy, which is why Alex Groundwater 3 years ago was talking about the destruction of the middle class, wealth, death in poverty. I mean, it's again, brutal wording, but he wasn't joking, right? A lot of people who worked hard, saved up, and have done everything right are still going to find themselves destitute. And that is a horrific, there's nothing funny about this. right? And I completely disagree with people, young people going, oh, it's their own fault. They should have looked out. No, when they bought their home 20, 30 years ago, they had no idea what was going to happen. They didn't know prices were going to go up. They didn't know inflation was going to happen. There are very large swathes of people who are not being greedy buy-to-let landlords. Not all buy-to-let landlords are greedy, but some of them are. By the way, I've got a story about that. Personal story about greedy buy-to-let landlords at the end of this video. I'll mention it if I remember. Yeah, it's just really horrible. And that is why I wish more people would stop waiting to sell. Because at the top of the market, your homes as an asset are tumbling not only in price, but also in value. The two things are different. The price is tumbling, and the value of what you're going to take out in terms of how much it will buy you later is also falling because of inflation, still up at 4%. And if everybody was able to get their heads around what that means, be selling sooner. And I know nobody wants to rush to sell in this market, because that just means selling it for even less than you wanted. But you got to, when it's a market like this and like next year's going to be, you've got to cut your losses. And if you're watching this thinking, well, I hear what you say, Charlie, but I don't think it applies to us, but you don't have a reason, like a tangible reason why it doesn't apply to you, I would urge you to reconsider. Oh, God, I'm getting depressing again. Right, onwards. Bloomberg. London house prices fall for the first time in more than a year. Well, I mean, that's more than a year. I mean, that's a kind of misleading headline, because London house prices have been falling for a long time overall, right? But this is the point. I think here's the graph. Look at that. Really interesting graph that really shows the divergence between the different property types. So this graph only goes back 18 months. But what it shows you is that in the last 12 months, there's been a real sort of spreading out of the different property types. The black line is overall property types combined together, but the other ones are showing that semi-detached houses have performed the best overall in London, and flats and maisonettes have performed the worst. And you might look at that and think, oh, it's only 2% fall, it's not that bad. That's the average of all flats. And when you then look at the regional variations in London, which are I've got it up, so I might as well show you the regional variations in London. So just to remind everyone, right, that graph was London average as a whole, but in the last year, all these different boroughs have had annual price changes ranging from plus 3.8% down to minus 9.9%. Okay, they're all doing different things. So don't think that this graph here is representative of what's happening with all boroughs in London. It's not. It is an overall thing, but it's still notable. I think it's interesting that overall combined averages, the whole bloody lot, according to the ONS, which is the most optimistic, it's even more optimistic than Rightmove. London overall coming down. And that's lagging, remember, right? The ONS data is quite heavily lagged because of delays in the land registry. And there was one more news story that came out this morning that didn't make it into the bullet points. 45% of landlords to sell all their properties if the government decided to make them pay national insurance on their rental income. There seems to be this bizarre belief amongst the eat the rich, tax the rich lot that you can do this and people will just suck it up. This is the root of the flaw in that thinking. The maths only adds up if you assume that everyone who is affected by this change just goes, okay, we'll just suck it up. And that's a survey by a buy-to-let company of some kind, saying that nearly half of all landlords will sell all their properties. And I know that there are some of you thinking, well, that's great news. That's yet more cheaper property for first-time buyers to buy. And to an extent, that is true. And from that point of view, it is good news for a first-time buyer who's going to be buying in a year's time or two. Yeah, this is good news. But it also comes at a horrific human cost, of which there can be no doubt. It has now been evidenced in government's data for a long time that this is the number one cause of spiking homelessness. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't care, it doesn't affect me, it does. Because your council and your public services that you rely on are directly affected because your council is the one that has to pay. So suddenly you've got a tenant paying their rent happily in a landlord's house. Landlord says, I've got to sell up. Tenant says, I can't find anywhere else to live. Goes to the council. Council says, okay, we will now house you. You are paying for that through your council tax. And you're paying through it through failing local services. So people who think there isn't a direct impact on all of us, a direct impact on quality of public services, schools, police, all of it is directly impacted when homelessness and temporary accommodation goes up, right? And it's going up very fast and it's at record levels. And if this happens, it will get worse. So not only are we going to have pensioners facing death in poverty, we're also going to have young families being made homeless by what's happening as a result of government policies over the last 30 years. Right, let's take some, can't believe anyone's still watching, it's so depressing. Do we have questions? Wow, that's interesting. Wait, that's just moved. Oh, I can't find that now. Oh yeah, I was going to tell you that story, wasn't I? I will tell you that story. Yesterday, I had a phone call from a lifelong family childhood friend. And she is a mother of 3 grown kids, and her husband died last year of cancer. And he died far too young, right? And they have been renting the same home for 12 years. And in 12 years, they've never missed a rent payment once. And they've done all the maintenance themselves because they were people who incorrectly assumed that you've got to keep your landlord really happy or he can just throw you out like that. So they've been absolute, like perfect tenants as far as the landlord's concerned for 12 years, paying the rent on time and maintaining the property at their own expense to a degree. Turns out that their landlord is leveraged up to the eyeballs on several properties, interest only. His mortgage rate has gone from fixed to variable, so his monthly mortgage payments have just jumped up. He's done no maintenance on the property in 12 years. The window frames are collapsing. There's no double glazing. They can't keep the place warm because of that. And bereavement, husband dying, 3 kids, right, to struggle. And he put the rent up nearly 20% after the guy, the breadwinner for the family died, decided to put the rent up 20%. She can't afford that. He's now coming around and verbally harassing her, saying, why aren't you going to pay? Why don't you get your kids to pay? Why don't you do that? I mean, it's infuriating. And this is the kind of landlord behavior because he's clearly panicking, right? Because he realizes that if she can't pay her rent, he can't pay them the interest-only mortgages on the flat. These are the kind of landlords that have not contributed anything to society. They have leached off their tenants. They've added no value to their tenants' home. And the moment things aren't going perfectly, they get all angry and threatening. And for any tenants in that situation watching this, or if you know of tenants in that situation watching this landlord has already broken regulations, right? First of all, the law protects your right to occupy your home in peace as a tenant, right? It protects you from this kind of harassment from a landlord. Okay, verbal harassment, coming around knocking on the door, basically making you feel intimidated and threatened, especially when you don't know what the rules are, and saying, if you don't pay, I'm going to have you out in a month. You can't do that as a landlord, right? It's first of all, that's wrong. Secondly, it's intimidating. But I know that there are tenants who will just up and leave because they don't know their rights. So first of all, if you are a tenant in that situation, make sure, number one, you go and look up, what are my rights to stay in occupation as a tenant, right? What can the landlord do and what can he not do? Make sure you find that out. This landlord has also just slapped a Section 21 notice on it. But when you want to go to court and get a Section 21 order from the court, there is a paperwork process that is very detailed and precise. And if you haven't followed the steps perfectly from the start of the tenancy, your application for Section 21 possession order won't be granted. He hasn't done this. This guy's a total amateur, right? So, and I pointed out to her, without advising, I said, your right to remain in occupation of that property is protected by law until such time as bailiffs with a court eviction order turn up. Right? And until that day, nobody can harass you, threaten you, intimidate you, or tell you to get out. The law, it would be illegal for anyone to do that. The law protects you to stay in occupation. And that process can take anywhere from 4 to 12 to 18 months. And that's if the landlord's done everything right and the paperwork's right. And if they haven't done it right, it's going to be longer. And if the landlord has breached the tenancy agreement, which this one clearly has in terms of failure to do maintenance, that kind of stuff, it's going to be even harder for them. And I said, you need to make an offer to your landlord and say, this is what I'd like. I'd like the following maintenance items fixed. And I'm offering to pay, this is the level of rent I can afford to pay. And if you can't accept my reasonable offer, that you may not like, but that's my reasonable offer, then I've got no choice but to use the full extent of the law to protect my occupation in this property for as long as possible, which is a way of saying I don't even have to pay rent and I can stay here until I'm evicted by court-appointed bailiffs. And for a landlord who's in that situation where interest-only mortgage up to the hilt, variable rate nightmare, what are you going to do? You're going to accept the reasonable offer, aren't you? Because if you already can't afford stuff because you've maxed out leverage to the hilt, you've got an option of a tenant saying, fix the stuff in the property and I'll pay you the rent that I can afford to pay you. Or I can't pay my rent and I'm going to stay here for as long as I can. Yeah, so in this scenario, in the short term, the tenant has the upper hand massively. And that's before the Renters' Rights Bill comes in. But it just boils my blood when people who've had a free ride of it for 12 years from a perfect tenant that's been zero hassle, has looked after the property, suddenly turn nasty like this. Like, have a word with yourselves. And if you are a landlord in that situation, watching this and thinking, what the hell do I do? The best outcome is for you to sit down with the tenant really reasonably and say, look, I understand you're struggling. I'm struggling too. What's the best way forward for both of us? That is the best approach, right? And it may not be as much as you want, but the law protects your tenants. So the best thing to do is to agree to get them to pay whatever they can and keep paying it while you take the steps that you need to take to sort your situation out, which if that's selling the property, then so be it. Go through the proper channels. And during that period of time, you're at least getting some rent rather than having to face expensive court costs for a tenant that no longer wants to cooperate with you. Anyway, that's that situation. I'm going to be helping my friend deal with her landlord. He's going to wish he never went round there. Right. Oh, hello. New name that I'm not even going to try and pronounce. Mosey Slack. It says, what is the price forecast for the next 5 years? Well, it depends. It's different wherever you are in the country. It depends whether you're in Scotland, England, Ireland, Wales. It depends whether you're in a house or a flat, or leasehold or freehold. It depends if you're urban or rural, top of the market, bottom of the market. But overall, pretty bleak, flatlining at best, probably coming down a lot further. But prices are going to, at the higher level, prices are going to come down a lot more than at the lower level, right? There's not going to be, unless there is a credit event, a credit crunch, a liquidity problem like 2008, on top of all the other problems that we've already got that are already causing prices to come down, then at the bottom level of the market, prices are just going to they might come down a little bit. Some places they might go up a little bit. They kind of be stable first time buyer level as wages increase faster than house prices. So the affordability will gradually improve. If there is a credit event, however, that is what can trigger an actual collapse. Sorry about the beeping. Prices going up? No. No. Most elect prices not going up. Prices going down. Generally speaking, that's my expectation, my opinion. Not a prediction. Not a prediction. For those of you who don't understand the difference between an opinion, it's my opinion. Could be wrong. Not a prediction. If I make a prediction, I explain exactly why with a lot of reasons, and I say I'm confident. I'm predicting this is going to happen because that's what I think. I'm not predicting anything. There's too many uncertainties. Yeah, I know there are also tenants that don't look after properties. I know that's true. That's a different topic, and we can cover that another day. Robert Smith says, Charlie, why are you promoting tenants waiting for a court-ordered eviction? You're just as bad as local authorities. I'm not promoting it. I'm saying that it's important that everyone, landlords and tenants alike, are aware of the law. Because if you're not aware of the law, whichever side you're on, it's impossible to negotiate a mutually acceptable arrangement. Because without understanding your negotiating position, you don't know what leverage you have in that negotiation. And in this particular instance, the landlords behave shockingly. So I'm making sure that the tenant is unaware of their rights. What you seem to be saying, Robert Smith, is it's better if the tenants don't know their rights. Well, I disagree. I'm very, very supportive of good landlords, right? And I would equally strongly support a landlord who's been an outstanding good landlord who has a tenant that suddenly started to behave like an absolute arsehole. I would help either person on either side, right? Whichever person's being unreasonable, I'd help the reasonable person. But it's really important. Yeah, exactly right. Sarge says, must be a pretty thick landlord raising rent on a tenant who has lesser ability to pay rent. Utter scumbag given the tragic circumstances. Yeah, utter scumbag. Utter scumbag. Simon Lloyd, FTSE appears to be nosediving again. Every Friday, is it? Right. Any other questions? I've got to go soon. What time is it? Yeah, I've got to go soon. I've got my car parked on a meter just off Oxford Street, which isn't cheap as you can imagine. And like 3 seconds after it's expired, you probably get clamped, towed away, and everything else. So, Sooty Spark says, what is your view on making offers on properties which have the guide price as offers in excess of? Thanks. Right. First of all, I always recommend that sellers don't use offers in excess of. Even if you know you've priced your property really well, buyers will know that. And what often happens is desperate sellers will say that, thinking that maybe it'll just make people offer above that price. But it won't if the market for the property is in that price. So my view is it depends how long they've been on. If it's a brand new instruction and there are lots of people viewing and bidding and offering, then that's an indication that that has been launched at a very keen price and that it's quite likely to achieve a price above the guide price. But if it's been sitting on the market for 6 months with offers in excess of, then you can just ignore it and just completely ignore it and make your offer if you like it. Yeah, Sarge says that landlord wants his property back purely because he's caught short. Correct. And if you are a landlord that wants your property back, you're going to get it back much sooner by cooperating with the tenant, because there are only two approaches. Either you approach tenant and say, I'd like to sell the property. There's no rush, but I would like to sell it. I wanted to give you as much advance notice as I can. No paperwork, no Section 21 at this point. But how is it for you? How long do you need to find somewhere else? Can we work together? That is the most intelligent way to proceed. Unless you're going to just sell your property to another landlord with a tenant in situ, that's the best way to do it, or sell your property to your tenant. So, number one, I want to sell my property. Do you want to buy it, tenant? If not, okay. Number two, do you want to move or do you want to stay? If you really want to stay, okay, I'll see if I can sell it to another landlord so you can stay. Right? That's often doable, and in fact, in this market, I'd say that's going to get you sold much faster as a landlord. Okay, selling a rental property with a tenant in place that's a good tenant, you might not get what you would in the open market, but it'll take you much longer to get it to the open market. And in a falling market, you're going to wish you just sold it to another landlord. Okay, but if you can't sell it to another landlord, and if you end up with there's no question you're going to have to evict the tenant, and they don't want to get out. Then again, it's better to give them advance notice, because if they know it's coming, they're going to start thinking and looking at their options sooner. Okay. The worst thing you can do as a landlord who wants to sell is to blindside your tenants with a Section 21 notice. It's the worst thing. It's the worst thing for you as well as for them. It doesn't make any sense. Robert Smith says, why should it be assumed the council will rehouse you? They have a legal obligation to, if you qualify. So if you are being forced out of your rented property when you are not in arrears, you've done nothing wrong, it's a no-fault eviction. If you cannot find another home, and you're literally, you've tried, there's nowhere else you can find, then you can go to the council and say, we are going to be forced into homelessness by our landlord. And the council, if you don't wait until eviction, the council does not have an obligation to rehouse you. Okay. Now, there are landlords who just don't care that they're going to lump their tenant onto local council taxpayers and make it their problem. I want my house back. I want to sell it, stuff it. I'm going to are you a contributor to society if you're that kind of landlord? No, you're not. You are forcing, for your own convenience and financial benefit, you are forcing your tenant onto the local council's books, local council taxpayers' expense, and directly impacting local services if that council has to pay temporary accommodation rates for the family that you've made homeless. Okay, so I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with it. That's simply what the law says, right? So if you are a family and you can't find another home to move into, and you're going to be homeless, and you've got children, and most of them do have children in this, if you go look at the government stats, what are you going to do? You're going to go to the council and go, we're going to be homeless. I've got kids. Like, there's nothing else you can do at that point. That's very funny, whoever that is. Caution, this market, brackets vehicle, is reversing. Yeah. Sarge says, on his own financial mismanagement, this is the kind of landlord which has given rise to the tar 'em all with the same brush, renters' rights bill. Absolutely right. Yeah. Anne Robertson says, if the landlord is short, the property will end up being repossessed anyway. Exactly right. And so that landlord, who's probably got no equity in that property because he hasn't paid off the mortgage, it realizes that actually there's no asset. He's just lost his income, and he's got a mortgage, and he doesn't want to default on his mortgage. So yeah, there are tenants in that situation who are going to say, it's going to stay. There's no point. I'm going to stay. I'm not going to pay my rent, and I'm going to save up the money I would have been paying in rent. Save up, so that when I move, I can afford, maybe not to rent somewhere else, but maybe I'll have a deposit enough to buy somewhere. If I can save up all what I would have been paying in rent for a year or something. Who knows? Who knows what the numbers are? David Holloway, who's a landlord, says, you're right, Charlie. He is a scumbag. I look after my tenants and they look after me. Quite right. That's the sensible way to do it. Oh, don't tempt me. Optimus J says, if you're near Soho, pity it's too early for a Guinness and then Toucan and the hair of the dog and all that. That could just be the way that today goes. I know there is a teddy bear on the window. Can you see? It's a giant teddy bear on that. I'm really gonna have to go, guys. Actually, just reading the comments. But Raymando Senior says, "Can I delay my completion date by a month, as it gives me 1 month of mortgage-free saving, and would appease the house buyer who I'm on good terms with?" It's up to you. It's between you and the counterparty. If they agree, then yeah, you can do it. You just have to tell you both have to tell your conveyancers that you've agreed to delay the completion date by a month. Yeah, right, guys. So it's time for me to go. Is there anything I said I'd tell you which I haven't told you? Any important questions I haven't answered? Just looking through the comments here. Yeah. Optimus J says that FT article is a big sign. The overvaluing goose is possibly cooked. I'll tell you what I think is going to happen after the Renters' Rights Bill comes in, by the way. I think there's going to be the development of an underground lettings market, an underground rental market, a black market for lettings. And I think it's going to thrive because I think it's going to be in the interests of both landlords and tenants to do rental agreements on the side. And a lot of people won't want to do that. But I think a lot of people will be forced into that. And there will be unscrupulous landlords who exploit tenants and do that. But there will also be some who go, we can agree something between the landlord and tenant that's fairer and more reasonable, that works for both of us. For example, right? I reckon if a tenant goes to a landlord and goes, look, I know I'm not going to get a short hold tenancy, and therefore I know I'm not going to get any of the court protections, but I'm happy to give you a year's rent up front. And I think there's going to be things like limited companies popping up to do what are called corporate lets that are outside of short hold tenancy, and they're going to do that for customers and go, hey, we can arrange a tenancy with you. It doesn't break the law. It exploits a loophole. That's what I think is going to happen. I think this Renters' Rights Bill is just a cluster bomb. Note my improved language there. A cluster bomb waiting to happen. Yeah. Honestly, I'm gonna. I've got to wrap up, guys. Please, actually, quite a lot of you, quite a lot of new subscribers to the newsletter in the last week. So there are more of you subscribing than there are unsubscribing. So new subscribers are signing up at sort of 20 times the rate that people are unsubscribing. That's a good sign. I hope you're enjoying the newsletter. If you don't get it, that's where you can get it. Just join the newsletter mailing list there. Leave it anytime. In the description below, if you're new here, there are links to my 10 golden rules for home buyers, 10 golden rules for home sellers, 5 golden rules of making an offer. And there are links to my conveyancing partners and my mortgage broking partners, and my property search pack providers. And I recommend you consider using all of those guys because they are absolutely fantastic. And it's those guys that are helping my followers have more successful sales and more successful purchases. So please do, because it supports me massively. And if you appreciate the content on this channel, I would appreciate your support in return. I vouch for them all personally. And on that happy note, have a fantastic weekend. I hope the sun shines wherever you are. There's blue sky here. Let's just have another quick look out in the street there for those of you who missed the beginning. That's where I am. And there's the teddy on the roof. Oh.